Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're doing really well. Listen, before we dive into the latest AI news, where we share our views and bring you the latest insights, hit the like, hit the subscribe, do all those incredible things. We really, really appreciate it. We really appreciate your support, and say hi in the comments below. Will, let's
Absolutely.
dive into the latest AI news story that we've got.
Yeah, let's dive in. This one's a good one. I think this is very pertinent to what we're working on, and something that's come up really recently within our own open source projects, being the Nano Collective and Nano Coder, which I've spoken about on the channels before. And this is from Cursor, which is talking about something that I'm hearing a lot more within the industry, especially as we try to just make language models for coding generally more efficient. But I think this is one of the key cornerstones to how we improve local first and private AI as well. Because context, if you didn't know, Ben, is sort of the ongoing pain with models, forever. How do you give a model good context? How do you keep it from deviating from task as context fills up? Because, a lot of these models, they tout, we have a 1 million token context window. We have a 256,000 context token window. But the reality of that is they don't, because it's not useful beyond 50-60%. The model starts to hallucinate and deviate from task and get confused because its context is filling up with what becomes a lot of irrelevant information. So dynamic context and how you can give a model good context has become kind of the forefront of discussion in how we improve local model performance and small model performance as well, because small models are inherently terrible at managing context and staying on task. And this is from Cursor, but this is just echoing a couple of the things that are important to remember and what are being developed. And it's actually nice to read this from a large frontier coding company or a software company that's developing software for large language models, echoing a lot of the stuff that I've personally been thinking about and talking about with people as well. And it's how you improve, those model contexts. So no, it's absolutely fascinating. Ben, any first thoughts, or shall I keep talking?
No, silly first thoughts are really, it just sounds like a human, really, to be honest with you, where, you get a bit bored with your thinking and you start drifting off with your thoughts, you lose distraction. Because I guess ultimately that's, in a way, what that context problem is. As a human, you may get distracted, you may get a bit bored, but the difference is you don't just carry on churning out an output which it has absolutely irrelevance to what the focus initially was. So I guess that's the danger. We can actually not output just something irrelevant, whereas an AI carries on doing that even if the context is lost. For those who aren't as technical, I mean, it's basically it's like memory, isn't it? Well, and it's like keeping focus on the task and being aware of the specific points. It's like a filing cabinet. Only refer to these sort of documents, for example, not drift off into file 3. You want to focus on file 1.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly how it works. Is you request something from the model, for example, what is in this file, and like a human, if you didn't give it that file, you wouldn't know what's in it, and it's going to come up with some rubbish answer. So you pass additional context to that model, or you let the model retrieve additional context in the form of coding, which is what this is all about, this article here, and it can read that file and then tell you the output. What then happens typically is someone, go mate, yeah.
Sorry, Will, I was just going to say, so, just for the audience, how does this work? We can probably guess why it's important. Having better context means better output, means better responses, means better workflows and all those things. How are we tackling the problem? How is the industry tackling the problem? How are we looking at it? What's the future?
Yes, no, absolutely. This is the thing, because once you've done that initial read file and it's told you what's in that file, often what a lot of people do is they just then ask a follow-up question, and slowly, as humans do, they deviate away from what was the original question. But at the same time, all of that previous context of conversation is still in there, and then the model doesn't know necessarily what it's referring to. And with local first and small models, this becomes a particular problem. So Cursor are echoing everything very nicely condensed down in this article into pretty much what we're talking about. One of the things is dynamic context discovery. Now that sounds complicated, but it's not. It's ensuring that the model can access context more easily if it needs it, but doesn't store it for a long time. So this is one that I am particularly interested in, again, for nanocoder, for the coding side of things, but also for models that run in the likes of Whisper, for example. You know, if you want it to be a true personal assistant, you're going to want it to be able to access context about you and your system and the things that you give it access to. And, you know, it can't store that all in context, because it will, especially a small model like Whisper's one, will just get lost. So one of the really key things is to give it access to a file system, and it can turn things like tool calls or context information that you give it into essentially memories, that it knows that they're there, and it's named in a way that it can retrieve those memories easily. But the actual context that the model holds in its responses at any given time are, you know, atomic, small. And then if you ask it, what was in that file again? It can then go and retrieve that memory, answer your question, and then dump that context. It doesn't need it again. And it makes it really easy to retrieve memories. So that's a really key one. The second one, which is... Yeah,
sorry, Will, can I just jump in a moment?
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's getting me thinking about how both the frontier models are going to be tackling this, as well as on-device applications like we're exploring and we're developing and we're doing. Because when you think about it, the frontier models, how are they going to be able to provide every individual human being on the planet that ability to have real personalized context per individual? Because ultimately it's the one model. Is it all sucking in all that knowledge base and somehow, you know, distributing it correctly to the individual? Whereas the approach that we're having is very much on-device AI. It's your AI. You're then going to be able to train your AI with the specific context of your life, your personality, your preferences, your hopes, your fears. And,
yes,
you know, so I just wonder if there's going to be a real interesting dynamic in terms of the way, not just technically that plays out, but in terms of actually the AI will just feel more yours when it is on device, because literally it knows you. And obviously there's that privacy side and that security side.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I'll say that for another conversation. But can you see what I'm saying? Because, you know, how is a big frontier model going to deal with that type of thing where you got billions, not millions, billions of human beings wanting their own specific context, whereas on device, it's going to be, you can specifically have it just for you.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, we have it easier developing on-device AI because, you know, you have your own instance of the model. You're downloading it, and when you build these kind of features like memory and file storage, and using file storage as memory, then you're asking the user to use their own hardware, like my computer and on my phone in front of me. It will use your own hardware, and that's just one of those things. However, if you're a centralized company, you have to host all that infrastructure, and you have to distribute different instances to different people, and it doesn't quite work like that. But you have your model, and then you just provide it the tools in which to access memory files. You know, how it does that is inherently more complicated on a server, because you have to split down where the memory is for, you know, this user and where the memory is for that user. It does become more complicated, whereas locally we can just go, well, the memories are all in that file. That's where you write memories. That's where you read memories.
And if inference then becomes a challenge and an issue, it then doesn't feel as real or as closely connected.
Yes.
So again,
it's much more
on device.
I
think on device is going to have that real advantage of making
100%.
the experience better, because we often talk about, to bring the adoption to the masses for on device, it has to all be about experience. You know, we have to be competing at that level.
Yeah, absolutely. And local actually has an advantage there. I think it's easier to engineer solutions, so that is awesome. So yeah, this is the one that really interests me, is turning long tool call responses, turning context that gets created during conversations into memory files, into task lists, and allowing the model to just read and write to those memory files and dump it when it doesn't need it, instead of just letting it stack up in this linear fashion that it does. The only other one which I find interesting, before I guess we'll wrap up this video, is the idea of this one's not much of a thing, but the idea of, where was it? It was somewhere, but I will stop sharing my screen and I'll tell you what it is. But it's the ability for the model to also summarize its context, which is really important. Again, in a coding world, if we're just stacking loads of different things, it's just keeping all the raw tool outputs one after another. and it doesn't do anything to condense that as well. What you should also allow the model to do is look at its own context and decide, do I want to summarize this? Do I want to store this? So these intelligent tools that you can give to the model to manage its own context is also a really interesting development within this, across various other things. I think to summarize this article, and what's quite interesting is that it's great to see large companies thinking about this for a whole different reason. I mean, they're just trying to optimize their large language models within their software for frontier models. However, this research, this development, these musings from these companies are awfully applicable to the open source world, and it's really interesting because we're going to be using them directly within local stuff as well.
Mate, that sounds amazing. Really interesting to see how this plays out. Listen, guys,
100%.
let us know what you think. Thanks for staying with us. Let us know what you think in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and we'll keep bringing you the latest AI news and keep sharing our views on that. Brilliant. Take care for now, guys. Take care.
Cheers, guys.